And I told you so. I'm a kid in the candy store with the leather on the denim. I ain't the cure, I'm the venom. If you wanna find me, find the taillights. Something's coming in, you're gonna wanna take a red eye. It's time to go. It's time to go. Get ready. Get ready. Get ready. Don't blink, don't blink. Get ready. Get ready.
Good afternoon to all of you. Saan man parte ng mundo kayo naroroon, kayo po ay nasa Ang Maestro sa Katipunan Channel. At ito po ang inyong lingkod, Ado Paglinawan, na nagpupugay ng muli. At ngayong araw na ito ay matindi. Matindi ang ating pag-uusapan dahil sa ang pamagat po ng ating episode ngayon ay Matinding Kabalintunaan. Ayan. Here we will discuss the impending economic decay and the forming pattern towards a democratic rot. Ayan po mga kabansa. At alam po ninyo, medyo panic index na sa Malacanang. Fever pitch na ang parang destabilization ng ating Pangulo dahil ang trust rating niya ay bumagsak ng 14% for performance approval rating from 58 to 44. Ayan mga kabansa, no? At ang kanyang trust rating ay bumagsak from 47 to 33. At ang footnotes dyan ay the survey highlights growing concerns about various issues such as inflation, corruption, and perceived weak leadership contributing to the erosion of public trust. Ang ibig sabihin po, ang may tiwala lamang sa ating gobyerno ngayon, sa administrasyong ito, ay 1/3 lamang ng populasyon. And worse, everywhere you go, especially in the urban areas in Metro Manila, at least everybody seems to be awaiting the showing of an alleged pulburon video involving the president himself. And latest to come out in social media is the purported casing mission of the Philippine Drug Enforcement Agency. Pero bago tayo pumunta dyan, pakinggan muna natin itong isang video. Play the video.
Kaya yan ay aking pinag-usapan doon sa aking vlog. Kasi sa kauna-unahang pagkakataon, merong nagsabi na nakita na niya. At ito nga si Mahatma. At ngayon lang niya sinabi yan, itong linggong lang nito. No? Sa katagal-tagal niyang nagsasalita laban sa dati niyang
nailalabas daw niya.
BBM, kauna-unahang pagkakataon sinabi niyang, finally nakita ko na yung video. No? At sa takdang panahon, ilalabas naman yan. At sa tingin niya, ang takdang panahon ay mga Hunyo. So, kaya nga, Kasko,
meron pa talaga mas
itong pulboronic video nito. At ang sabi ko, hindi naman kasi hukuman ang publiko. Kung susundin mo ang rules of court, dapat i-authenticate mo yan. Ipipresenta mo ang hukuman yung tao na kumuha ng video at identify niya na ito nga yung video na kinuha niya. Pero ang publiko hindi naman hukuman. So we're not governed by the rules of court. No, we are governed by the rules of public opinion. So pag lumabas yan, lahat ng Pilipino ay magiging huwes at magkakaroon sila ng paninindigan kung maniniwala sila o hindi doon sa nakita nilang video.
Parang naalala ko
Huli na lang to bago tayo magratata, 'di ba? May bolang kristal ka rin. Ano ba nakikita mong tamang panahon? Yung sinasabing tamang panahon na hinihintay siguro. Bakit kung kailan man ilalabas talaga, kung ilalabas man. Do you see that? Meron ba kayong naisip diyan?
Ang sabi ng aking bolang kristal, Paniwalaan nyo si Maharlika.
Yeah.
Kapag hindi nilabas yan ng Hunyo, si Maharlika mismo ang maglalabas niya. Yun ang sabi ng artikulo.
Ano talaga si Decay? Nako, anyway.
Hindi, sabi ko,
Yun, ang sabi, kapag wala daw ibang naglabas siya, nako, magiging impatient na itong si Maharlika, siya na magpapalabas sa kanyang vlog na Bojakera TV. Watch out for it.
Ayan mga kabansa, at nabanggit nga natin kanina na merong mga issues involving PDEA. At sa isang report ng Philippine Communications Office noong January 29, 2024, ang headline ay PBBM is not and was never in our drug watch list. The Philippine Drug Enforcement Agency vehemently denied that President Ferdinand R. Marcos Jr. is in its watch list for person linked to illegal drug use, contrary to accusations of former President Rodrigo Duterte. Kung natatandaan nyo, ito diniscuss natin dito sa programang ito. Duterte said that the alleged evidence was shown to him, when he was mayor of Davao, at ito ho ay noong 2012. At ito nga, may lumalabas na pre-operation report na tinakpan ang pangalan ng nag-apply for a casing of a certain address, 4C Rizal Tower Building, Rockwell, Makati City. Ayan mga kabansa. Pero ang mga subject, ayan, ang mga target, naka-cross yung pangalan ng isa, pero ang nakalagay dito, Bongbong Marcos alias Bonget and some unidentified male and female cohorts. Ano ho mga kabansa? Ito ho ay pinabulanan ng PDEA na wala raw sa AI system nila. Noon pa naman ho, ito 2012, hindi naman ho talaga pumasok ito sa AI system nila. So tama naman yung sinasabi ng PDEA, pero half-truth lamang. Dahil wala pa hong AI, artificial intelligence, no? System ang PDEA. Pero dito makikita natin, no, na bakit hindi ito natuloy, at kung sino man hong pumirma dito, no, kung sino man ang pumirma dito ay nagsasabi ngayon na handa siya sa isang sulat sa PDEA director at sa Office of the President at saka sa Senate and the House of Representatives. Handa siya mag-appear sa isang Senate investigation hearing kung saan patutunayan niya na authentic daw itong pre-operation report na ito. Pero sila ang sila ang mga dapat talagang magpatunay niyan, no? For the meantime, bakit doon sa Rizal Tower? Dahil ang plano yata noon ay magkaroon ng entrapment ng isang session kung saan people were having a drug session sometime in 2012. But at the rate it is going, mga kabansa, it seems to push the incumbent Marcos Jr. to possibly resign or fight it out with dictatorial powers, no? At yan ang ating punto de vista sa show na ito karon ngayong araw na ito, dahil whichever way it goes, one thing is sure, the people and the establishment will not tolerate, no, a drug addict running the country. Whether it's the Philippines or whatever, yan ang kontrobersiya. But since this president cannot be removed by impeachment because the Speaker of the House of Representatives is his cousin, no, or even if impeached, they can afford to buy a determinate vote in the Senate, katulad nung ginawa ng Noynoy Aquino administrasyon sa pag-impeach kay Rene Corona, to avoid conviction by the Senate. Kaya ang prospects po for a people power has been increasing. Former President Rodrigo Duterte has led protests in Davao and Cebu opposing the administration's wrong priorities in calling for a charter change, because he is of the opinion that the present dispensation merely wants to extend their term limits. Yan. At nagkakaroon po ng ominous show of force, especially by one religious sect conducting well-organized week-long prayer rally dito sa Liwa San Bonifacio in Manila, with an average of 5,000 attending, expressing dissent on how its leader, Pastor Apollo Kibuloy, has been tried by publicity by this government. Ang nakakatakot po dito ay the location is less than 3 kilometers lamang and about 20-minute walk from to Malacanang Palace. So, napaka fragile po ng sitwasyon na yan. But many wish to avoid any more EDSAs. Ayaw na ng mga tao yan eh. The first removed Marcos Jr.'s father Ferdinand in 1986, kung inyo natatandaan, sending the Marcos family to exile in Hawaii. And second, forced a constructive resignation of Erap Estrada, mga kabansa, in 2001. No? And that's how Gloria Macapagal Arroyo assumed presidency midway sa term ni Erap Estrada. Kasi ang sabi nila, pagka masyadong maraming tao na involved, there's always a prospect of foreign power deciding the final outcome. So, ang hope po is for a patriotic military to intervene and turn over leadership of the country to a revolutionary government led by a benevolent civilian junta that would turn the government from a dysfunctional unitarian trap set by the Americans onto a simplified federal parliamentary system. The mandate is in our Constitution. Pwede po mangyari yan with the cooperation of a benevolent, patriotic military, because in Article 2, Section 3 of our Constitution, it is provided that the armed forces of the Philippines is the protector of the people and the state. So, bakit nagkakaganyan ang mga porma-porma, mga kabansa? Pumunta tayo sa mga rason kung ano ang nagdi-destabilize pa dito kay President Marcos Jr. No? Politika ba? Kontrolado naman nila ang Senado, kontrolado naman nila ang Kamara, kontrolado nila ang Office of the President. No? So what is destabilizing? Punta po tayo dito sa dalawang issue basically. Ito po ang smoking gun kung tawagin ko. Ang totoo po, ang mga presyo ng bilihin have really skyrocketed, sending to as low as 70% ang real wages. In other words, kung ano yung mga kinikita at disposable na pera ng mga sambayanan, ang nabibili ay 75% lamang na equivalent. Bakit po? Yan nga po ang tinatanong ng bayan. Dahil ang bigas, for instance, makikita nyo naman dyan sa picture, pinakamura na dito sa tindahan na ito ay 50 at 62 ang pinakabataas. Ang problema dito ay nangako si Ferdinand Marcos Jr. na ibababa niya sa 20 pesos per kilo. So hindi na tayo pupunta sa debate dyan. Ito lamang ang lumabas as recent as March 6 to 10 sa survey. Nilabas po ito nitong April 2 yata. Na ang people's economic needs, ayan, controlling inflation 70, increasing pay of workers 36, fighting corruption government 26, creating more jobs 25, reducing poverty 25, assistance to farmers 19, addressing hunger, involuntary hunger 17, support to small entrepreneurs 14. So lahat halos po ng the majority of the double-digit figures from 14 to 70 all relate to pera, economy. Nahihirapan po ang tambayan ng Pilipino sa ngayon. Ang inaasahan nila was a quick post-pandemic recovery. Pero ang disconnect, mga kabansa, ayun, doon sa baba ng slide, pakita natin uli ang slide. Ang government priorities ay nandito sa protecting the integrity of Philippine territory against foreigners. 9% lamang po. In fact, the survey before this, three months ago in December, umakyat na nga yan ng 2% dahil 3% dahil 6%. At noong September last year naman sa survey ay 7% siya. So from September 7, napunta sa December 6, tumaas pa ng 9. At 1% lamang sa changing the Constitution. So ayan mga kabansa, makikita natin doon sa picture sa kaliwa sa ilalim, water cannon strike Philippine vessels enduring crew. At yung arrow points to this disconnect. So ang prioridad po ng administrasyong Marcos Jr. ay napaka malayo sa prioridad na hinaharap ng mga tao. Now, what makes this sensitive? Because after 30 years, mga kabansa, of revolving malgovernance that saw the transfer of many government assets to the private sector, thus shifting public service to private profiteering, the knowing corruption and incompetent public policies from Cory Aquino, the mother, to Noynoy, the son. Nag-elect po ang Pilipinas ng isang populist city mayor from Mindanao who hated drugs, communist terrorists, and Americans. Itong Promde na ito, ano ang Promde? One who comes from the province. However, was a stickler for the rule of law and had priorities that improved overnight the country's microeconomics, aiming for a single-digit poverty incidence. Overnight, his friendship with Xi Jinping, the president of China, energized tourism to the country by as much as 5 times, sent hundreds of thousands of micro and small-medium investors, converting Binondo and other Chinatowns into the country into a distribution hub for cheap products for rural commerce, and catapulted our exports to China, incentivizing our farmers and farm workers, and as a result, and poured infrastructure projects through grants and soft loans in a pace unseen in previous administration. I'm talking about Rodrigo Duterte. Ironically, the son of the former dictator, mga kabansa, itong si Marcos Jr., emerged as the mayor's successor mainly on a continuity platform, not just of the Duterte policies, but of the vision of his own father, Ferdinand Edward Marcos Sr., which is for the industrialization of the country. So, ang tanong, why did Marcos shift, kabansa, his decade-long foreign policy positions? Sa explanation po ni Rogando Sasot, an eloquent political scientist, ito sinasabi niya, the answer cannot be disentangled from the fact that his family's assets are frozen in banks in Western countries to the tune of several $billion. And this is his best shot to recover all of them, which has been frozen for over 3 decades. So, it's a tit for tat, sabi ni Sasot, that Marcos surely cannot refuse. Nakipagkompromiso po siya, according to Sasot, sa mga Amerikano para papasukin ang preferensya sa mga American intention sa ating bansa, mga kabansa, over the very simplistic balancing of foreign relations where China has given us some economic relief, especially before and after the COVID-19 pandemic. Ang propaganda says, hindi naman nakatupad ng China sa kanyang mga pangako, pero tandaan ninyo, 1 taon at kalahati doon sa term ni Duterte, we were under COVID. So I'm just trying to put it in its proper perspectives. The President Marcos' priority to modernize the military, allegedly to protect the sovereignty of the people against foreign aggression, ostensibly by China. But what he has done is to surrender the policy making to foreign intervention, in reality, by the United States. Yan ang naging problema. So, ano ngayon ang napipinto? Nakita nyo noong January dito sa slide, 2023. Bongbong Marcos was given the privilege of being the very first state visit to China at the beginning of calendar year 2023. Pagbalik niya rito, wala pang, ayan, nasa gitna, wala pang 1 buwan, wala pa 1 linggo pagbalik niya, no? In February 2023, binigyan po niya ng 4 additional sites sa mga Amerikano under the Enhanced Defense Cooperation Agreement para magbase. No? At noong May 2023, ay trines na niya ang polisiya na yan by forging a closer relationship with Joe Biden. Yan ho ang hanggang ngayon ay hindi maintindihan ng maraming analysts. No? Ganun ang agenda ng militar, pinakita natin kanina, represents only 9%, while yung economic priorities ng sambayanan goes as high as 70%. So, medyo nagkaroon po ng dislocation. Gumanon. Addressing the basic and prior needs of the people, punctuated by the towering price of rice and electricity on one hand, and the galloping corruption and repression of civil liberties on the other. So nakita nyo sa ating title, ano yung kabalintunaan na yan? Yan po ay yung irony. Bakit tayo nandito? Ibigyan natin ang atensyon ng ating militar para mag-modernize samantalang nagugutom ang sambayanan. No? And in order to divert the attention of the people from their rumbling stomachs and disappearing disposable incomes, si Jr. po ay very much engaged in military exercises, promoting so-called interoperability that are directed towards China, arising from deliberate disinformation involving South China Sea, para maghamo ng isang false flag, isang insidente para magsalpukan ang merkado at ang China. Ang problema nga lang dyan, mga kabansa, ay nasa gitna ang Pilipinas. And Marcos has no control of whatsoever in the country situation. Nakapunta siya sa Australia, punta siya sa Germany, punta sa Czech Republic, punta siya sa Amerika, kung saan lately, ay siya ay parang nag-aahente na isang version of NATO dito sa Southeast Asia. Ang gusto niyang tulungan ang Amerikano na maitayo para mailipat ang 60% ng military presence, mga kabansa, ng kano dito sa Asia Pacific. So yan, mga kabansa. So ano mangyayari dyan? Katakot-takot na propaganda. Stop xenophobia. Ayan. Sabi ng Philippine envoy, sabi ng China sa Philippine envoy. At ito po, mukhang ito si Babes Romualdez at talagang nagdi-determine at hindi si Enrique Manalo ng closest advice towards foreign policy ng Pilipinas. Ayan, no? For which ay sinalubong siya ni Councilor Xi Jinping. At sinabi na dahil sa kanyang sinabi ni Babe Romualdez that the real flashpoint for an armed conflict in the Indo-Pacific region is the South China Sea, hindi raw Taiwan. So sabi ni Councilor G, sino ba ang nag-i-steer ng sitwasyon diyan sa South China Sea? Sino ba nag-i-spread ng China threat? Who is ganging up in small blocks? Sino nagfo-form ng mga small blocks of countries? Who invented economic coercion? Sino ba mahilig mag-economic sanction, mag-trade war? Saan ba nanggaling yan? Sa China ba? At sino nagwe-weaponize ng economic power at ginagamit na leverage sa ibang bansa? China ba? Yan ho ang sitwasyon. No? So, anong anyari mga kabansa? The U.S. Trade and Investments Mission came to Manila, and as against what Babes Romualdez has announced to be about 3 trillion pesos, ay nag-pledge lamang ng 1 billion. So, 57 billion pesos lamang. Marami ho kasi, maraming kabalintunaan. And now the U.S. government, dito sa biyahe ni Marcos, has pledged 100 million a year for the next 5 years. Well, thank you, Uncle Sam. But that's only $500 million sa loob ng 5 taon. Xi Jinping pledged 23 billion. So again, naguguluhan ng tao ba? Bakit ito si Bongbong Marcos sa 5 billion? Sa 500 million. Samantalang ang pledge ni Xi Jinping sa kanya ay 23 billion. In grants, loans, infrastructure, investments, tourism, etc. Coming from China. In the past 3 years, mga kabansa, the past 3 years, nag-triple ang development support ng China sa Thailand. Well, maiba tayo ng direksyon. Huwag na tayong gumawa ng mga ng mga anong muna ngayon, mga comparatives, no? Pero dito sa nangyayaring information war o propaganda involving the South China Sea, we are experiencing a dead end as he could only get a small minority to agree with him na kaaway natin ang China. Karamihan ng Pilipino hindi naniniwala na kaaway natin ang China. Maraming mga charlatan, demagogues, sycophants, bigots, no? Have resorted to name-calling, ad hominem attacks against those who oppose the president's xenophobic actions. And walang balance eh. Okay lang naman eh. Hindi naman natin kaway ang US, hindi naman natin kaway ang China. Pero ganun ho, hindi balance eh. Nandoon ang kanyang preference and closer friendship to somebody nandito who can bring us only this. Samantala yung kabila, ang laki-laki ng pwedeng dalhin sa bansa, hindi pinapapasok. No? So, a friend of mine in the academia is saying that it's totally insane to make preparations as Marcos and his for war, as Marcos and his American masters are doing with their maritime cooperative activities in the South China Seas. Bakit? Sabi niya, para bang kumuha kayo ng Philippine jeepney? At gusto nyo isang kasabay na suburban Chevy, ayan. Pero ang kalaban nyo ay yung tinatawag na Hongqi, yung katumbas ng Rolls-Royce sa China. Sabi niya, ito ay isang napakalaking utot. Translated in English as, this is a lot of fart. Sabi niya. So, for the meantime, Marcos seems to be focused on wagging the dog for another American war to support the pockets of the U.S. military-industrial complex. His Department of Foreign Policy, mga kabansa, his Department of Foreign Policy is busy blocking 11 Chinese proposals, some of which the Philippines even requested since his state visit to China last January. Lampas na ho ng isang taon, hindi ho umuusad ang mga bilateral talks natin with China. Hindi ho nakikipag-usap ang Pilipinas dahil nakikipag-ututan siya doon sa South China Sea. Yung mga issue dyan, diniscuss na natin yan sa iba nating mga shows where the legal luminaries have displaced true diplomats in the department, insisting that China's positions are unconstitutional daw, pero hindi naman sila naglalabas ng baraha for our public perusal. Kayo lang nagsasabi niya. Hindi nyo ilabas sa taong bayan. At let the people decide kung ang constitutional nga yan o hindi. Alright? Ang Chinese tourism plummeted down. Noong 2015, pinakamataas ni Noynoy Aquino, 360,000. Noong 2018 to 2019, naging 2.7 million po yan. Wow! From 360,000 to 2.7 million? Hindi biro yan. Hindi biro yan. Medyo disconnect ang ating Zoom. Anyway, no? Kung makapasok lamang ang lalo na mga economic exchanges on top of what is going on. The Chinese factor can make a big difference in curbing inflation through cheap trade and infusion of new money. Yan ho ang rason eh. Binabarahan nila kung ano mang pwede itulong ng China. Wala naman tayong objection kung magkarelasyon sa Estados Unidos. Wala naman tayong objection kung i-modernize nila ang military. Eh bakit nila nilalagyan ng tapo ang bilateral relations natin with China? At yan ang rason. Pumunta kayo sa Binondo ngayon. Pwede kayo mag-skateboard sa Tutuban Station. Dati masasagsa kayo ng tao dyan. Sa dami ng mga taga-probinsyang namimili para dalhin sa ibang lugar ang mga goods para magkaroon sila ng negosyo no matter how kung paano maliit. No? So, kaya ho tayo dito sa ilalim ay nagigipit dahil ang pera ay nandoon lamang sa itaas. Nako, ano ang ating growth rate? Napakataas, 5.6. Ang tanong na sa bayanan, kung bakit ganyan kataas sa ating growth rate, eh bakit naghihirap ako? Ba't wala akong pera pambili ng bigas for a week at kailangan bumalik-balik ako sa palengke daily para lamang kumuha ng kalahating kilo ng bigas? At 2 milyon na raw ang nadagdag sa ating poverty line since last year. Pero yung crony ni Marcos Jr. na Aboitiz Energy Corporation na kumita ng 27.5 in profits in 2023, in 2023, binindisyonan pa niya ng isang behest loan of 20 million for renewable energy development. Kaya ito si Sabina Aboitiz, had so much liquidity and money, pero may sarili kang bangko, Union Bank, tahiramin ka pa ng ibang bangko, 20 billion. Sobra, lumalabas ang pera sa tenga. Kaya, recently, binili niya ang Coca-Cola Bottling Company. Yan. On the other hand, the presidential communications has run out of hyperboles and idioms and narratives to repair the presidential image and has been allegedly instructed, ito pa malungkot. Some people are accusing the First Lady of cracking down on government critics to the point of going after journalists, opinion writers, academic analysts, bloggers, articles against Marcos appearing in mainstream and social media are peppered with Malacanang troll attacks. Mga pro-China kayo, mga traidor, wala namang explanation. And a suspicious hit list surfaced in social media recently. Pero nire-research pa ho ng ating mga law student researchers who are verifying the possible source and veracity. Ayan, mga kabansa. Okay? And earlier, some congressmen and some senators like Risa Hontiveros started maligning Sunshine Media Network Incorporated and its titular head, Apollo Quebuloy, and some articles. What has this led into? Ay, bumaba na ho yan ngayon as law. Nagkakaroon ng repression. Unexplained repression. Ang ating mga human rights. In fact, sinuspindi ho, ang latest sinuspindi itong governor ng Davao del Norte. Dahil pumayag ang governor ng Davao del Norte na magkaroon ng prayer rally. May isang prayer rally sa Tagum. Tagum ba yun? O wherever that is. Ah, ito ho ang details. Pakinggan natin itong napaka-aktibong female podcaster from California. Please play the video.
So itong ginawa kay Governor Edwin Hubahib ay panggigipit dahil siya po ay sumusuporta sa boses ng taong bayan. As a governor of Tagum, Davao del Norte, nakapunta ako dyan sa lugar na yan. I stayed in Tagum for 3 or 4 months nung mga panahong yaon. Ang eksena pala na nangyari dyan, okay? Dahil natunugan ni Lisa Tanas, ni Marcos Jr., ni Lagdameo, na mga yawa, na mga bangag sa Malacanang, ay nagpadala sila ng emisaryo kay Governor Hubahib para wag ituloy itong pagrarally, itong pagbuboses ng taong bayan na sukang-suka na sila dito sa kay Kuting na ito. Based sa interview ni Hubahib, ni Governor na lang, ay pumunta si Bangag Lagdameo, okay, si Bangag na Bangag Lagdameo Jutang Ginemes, doon sa Tagum kung saan nagpadala siya ng emisaryo sa opisina ni Governor na, hey, nandito si Durugista o si Pulboronic Lagdameo na sa restaurant, aantayin ka daw niya doon, pumunta ka daw doon kasi mag-uusap kayo. Dahil pag-uusapan nga kung paano kumbinsihin si Governor na hindi na mag-organize o wag makipag-participate dito sa gaganaping rally itong parating na April 14. So basic explanation ni Governor, during that time, kaharap na yung mga constituents niya, yung syempre, trabaho niya as Governor. Kumbaga, office hour, working hours, nung pinuntahan siya ng emisaryo nitong Jutang Ginemes na si Dark Choco, si Lagdameo na bangag, pinangalanan naman ni Pangulong Duterte na si Lagdameo ay isang bangag na bangag, di ba mga palangga? So dahil mas pinili ni Governor Hubahib ang kanyang trabaho at ayaw niya hindi nga siya pumunta doon kay Lagdameo dahil working hours yun, kaya eto pala yung nangyari na nagkaroon ng preventive na sinuspend siya ng ganun-ganun na lang. Ano ba ang eksena dito? Basahin muna natin kasi doon sa hindi nakaka-follow, kailangan intindihin muna natin. Mga kababayan, kaya kailangan nyo ng kumilos, kailangan nyo ng mag-speak up lahat. Kasi, tubig, nga palangga, ito nga, ang opisina ni Kuting Jr., ang Office of the President, ang nagdesisyon na siya ay suspindihin ng walang due process. Walang due process, ibig sabihin illegal na pagsuspindi sa kanya dahil ayaw lang ng governor na ito, mga kababayan, na magpauto o ayaw lang ni governor na sundin yung maitim na si Dark Choco, na maitim talagang budi. Ayaw lang niyang sundin na pinipigilan siya na wag ituloy nga itong maisog rally na ito sa April 14.
O yan mga kabatsa, patunay lamang na ang panggigipit ng gobyernong ito has ferreted down to local government levels. No? Tuloy natin si Maharlika.
Order. Before this office are the 24th of November 2022 affidavit complaint filed by board member Orly Amit against Governor Edwin Hubahib for grave abuse of authority and oppression. And October 9, 2023 verified answer of the letter. Okay? Ngayon, mga palangga, after a preliminary evaluation and consideration of the parties' allegations and evidence, this office finds strong evidence of guilt against Governor Hubahib. Likewise, given the gravity of the offense charged, there is a great probability that his constituents in office could influence the witnesses or pose a threat to the safety and integrity of the records and other evidence. Okay? Wherefore, premises considered and pursuant to Section 63 Republic Act Number 7160, otherwise known as the Local Government Code 1991, and Section 1, Rule 6 of Administrative Order Number 23, 1992, of this office as amended, Governor Hubahib is hereby placed under preventive suspension for 60 days effective immediately upon receipt of this order.
Alam po ninyo, nung nasa Melbourne si Presidente Marcos, he claimed that he has not been tempted to enforce an authoritarian system in the Philippines. Ako'y nagtataka na ito ay binanggit ng ating Pangulo, no? As he justified his late father and namesake's decision to declare martial law. In an interview with ABC News, Marcos was asked, as the only son of a president overthrown by people's revolt, ang sabi ni Marcos, how do you resist the impulse to authoritarianism? Ang sabi niya, I have no impulses to authoritarianism whatsoever. Ayan, mga kabansa. Pero ano ang nangyayari ngayon? Si Kuting, tawag sa kanya ni Maharlika, at ang mga taong nakapaligid sa kanya, lalo-lalo na kanyang may bahay, seem to be engaged in some nefarious activities that forms a pattern towards authoritarianism. This is how former President Rodrigo Duterte places it, that Marcos has become an authoritarian. Pakita natin ang video.
Hindi na sinusunod ni Pangulong Marcos Jr. ang demokrasya ng bansa. Ayon yan kay dating Pangulong Rodrigo Duterte. Sabi pa niya nagiging authoritarian na ang pamumuno ng Marcos kasunod ng ginawa nitong pagpapatalsik sa pwesto kay Governor Edwin Hubahib ng Davao del Norte. Narito ang balita ni Cathy Villanueva.
Hindi na napigilan pa ni dating Pangulong Rodrigo Duterte na akusahan si Pangulong Bongbong Marcos ng pagiging diktador. Ito nga'y kasunod ng pagtanggal sa pwesto kay Davao del Norte Governor Edwin Hubahib. Si Hubahib ay naharap sa 60 araw na suspension order base sa utos na inilabas ng Department of Interior and Local Government o DILG na pinirmahan naman ni Executive Secretary Lucas Bersamin. Ang gobernador ng Davao del Norte ay basta na lamang pinaalis sa pwesto at inakusahan ng kasong matagal nang naresolba sa kanyang probinsya. Ani Duterte, hindi na sinusunod ni Marcos Jr. ang demokrasya ng bansa.
I am accusing Marcos of bringing us back to the old politics. Gayon nung suspend tapos tanggal na tao no ng tatay ko, halos ganun ang ginawa nila. If that is what he is doing now, I am accusing him of another thing, being an authoritarian leader. Alam mo, we are drifting into that kind of setup, which I think, to me, is very important for the President to realize it. Mr. President, hindi mo na sinusunod yung demokrasya. And you are, yung pag ganun na style, you are veering towards a more authoritarian. Mahirap yan, hindi sanali ang Pilipino. I am just warning you. Ako sa isa talaga na hindi ako papayag. Na kung magtanong ka na what I intend to do, I will raise hell one day, and I would ask the military and the police to join me. Not to force you out of the office. We'll just air our sentiment for you not to forget that the Philippines is a democratic state.
Sinabihan rin na Duterte si Marcos na dapat nitong alalahanin na si Hubahib ay binoto at iniluklok sa pwesto ng taong bayan, kaya't hindi tama na basta na lang itong patalsikin sa pwesto.
Tanggalin mo ang tao walang rason. And you must remember that the governor of North Davao has been elected by the people. Hindi yan trabahante na in-appoint mo tapos tanggalin mo. We have to respect the will of the people of that North Davao. Puro respeto naman.
Ayan po mga kabalintunaan. It is an irony that our economic opportunities are not being used. Sabi nung iba, are not being maximized. No, they're not being used at all. Nakatenga ang possible boost na pwede natin makuha from China. At bumabalik tayo dito sa 1982 when foreign intervention has marginalized not only our economic opportunities but has repressed our human rights. If the trend continues, no? At ito ho, makakabasa kayo dito sa akin libro. You can have the book by texting 0917-336-4366. Some of those features na sinasabi ko, not maximizing our economic opportunities and repressing human rights, nandito po sa librong ito. Hindi lahat, no? So you can get that book, no, by texting 0917-336-4366, no? At kung itong trend na ito ay tutuloy, mga kabansa, we might repeat history in the same way his senior exited power. The Americans in 1982 started tightening the financial noose on Ferdinand Edralin Marcos Sr. Instead of looking for an alternative solution, anong ginawa ng senior? He dug into his perceived friendship with Ronald Reagan after dancing with the latter's wife Nancy during the state visit to Washington, September of that year. Ang hindi niya alam, na as soon as he and Imelda returned to the Philippines, dalawang neo-conservatives, si George Shultz at si Paul Wolfowitz, had already organized meetings for his removal, some under the auspices of the Center for Strategic and International Studies, yung synarchist wing ng American politics with commanding presence in both Democratic and Republican parties nila, representing the military-industrial complex also known as the Deep State, ay pinaplano na pala ang kanyang downfall. In 1983, na-assassinate si Ninoy Aquino sa Philippine tarmac, lalong nagkagulo. And in 1984, the World Bank and the International Monetary Fund sinarhan ang lahat ng loan windows to the Philippines at the instance of the U.S., resulting in the closure of most factories, sending the economy to a halt. In 1985, Marcos Sr. conceded to the White House to pressure him to seek a fresh mandate through a snap election. The snap election held in February 7, 1986. Pagkatapos noon, 18 days after, he was already on his way to Hawaii with his family for exile, where he would meet his eventual death. Ang mga pwersa po ng Center for Strategic and International Studies are very much inside our government right now, are very much in the narrative and in the debates involving the West Philippine Sea, and is very much influential with our Philippine military. So meron na itong presidency na ito, mga kabansa, ng mga tinatawag na fifth columns, deeply entrenched, not just in its policy making, but for a possible regime change. Sabi nga no, isa kong dating kaibigan, bago niya ako siniraan sa Viber page. Walang choice si Marcos kundi sumunod sa mga Amerikano dahil may nakatutok sa ulo niya. At pagka yun, hindi niya sinunod ang utos, sabi niya gano'n, tanggal siya sa pagka-presidente. Kayo na humatol, mga kabansa. Kayo na humatol. Dahil pagdating dyan, hindi ko huhusgahan si Ferdinand Romualdez Marcos Jr. Pero sa simula pa lamang ng programang ito, pinakita ko na sa inyo the instability of the situation dahil sa mga ironical situations na nangyayari. Ang hinihingi lang natin ay balansin yan, pero it might be too late. And the question that people are asking is not how long will Marcos Jr. last, kung hindi how short. Diba? Hindi nakakatawa yan. We are not happy na ang ating bansa will have to undergo this. When most of us campaigned for this man, most of us voted for this man, most of us nabudol by this man because he reneged on his promises and he chose the worst enemy to be his friend. So, ayan ang mga dapat pagmuni-munian natin, pagnilay-nilayan natin, mga kabansa. Sinasabi nila, kumapit daw tayo sa Amerikano because of its ironclad commitment. Hindi sila tumulong sa atin nung mawala ang mischief reef. Nag-control natin sa mischief reef. Hindi sila tumulong sa atin. Ginulo pa nila tayo. Kaya nawala ang Scarborough Shoal sa atin. Nung nagtatayo ang China ng 5 artificial islands, nanood lang sila, mga kabansa. Tapos ngayon, sasabihin nyo, just because of the Mutual Defense Treaty, sasaklolo sa atin ang China kung magkagulo rito at magkaroon ng gera dito sa Pilipinas na Amerika ang nagsimula. Mutual Defense Treaty kayo dyan. Mayroon akong isang expert at ito ang kanyang opinion tungkol sa Mutual Defense Treaty. Let's play the video.
Is not necessarily bound to immediately react because the provision of the Mutual Defense Pact is that you will immediately take steps as is necessary to meet the contingency in accordance with your constitutional processes. What does that mean? That means that you go to the Senate and the House of Representatives. What does that mean? That means delay while we are dying there.
Yan po ang expert na itatapat ko sa inyo. Sila ang magdidebate doon. Tingnan niyo si Zelensky. Humingi ng 110 billion to replenish his war needs sa Ukraine. After over 1 year, binigyan nga siya, pero 60 lamang. Bakit? Dahil the rest of the money binigay sa Israel at binigay sa Taiwan. Makapaghihintay ba tayo ng overhaying? Kung magkakaroon ng salpukan ng gera dito? By that time, mga kabansa, ilang milyong Pilipino na, just like in World War II, naghintay tayo ng 4 na taon para sa mga Amerikanong bumalik dito. 1 milyong Pilipino na ang namatay. You will be discussing over there in Washington, D.C. while we are already dying here. Maraming salamat po sa inyong pagtangkilik. Ito po si Ado Paglinawan. Nagpapaalam na ang Maestro dito po sa Katipunan Channel. Maraming salamat.
Get ready.